You're listening to Making the Cut, the mostly true life story of a retired surgeon from 1C Productions.
Hi, I'm Rebeca Seitz, founder and president of 1C Productions, where thoughtful entertainment comes alive. Our content, like the show you're about to hear, sometimes includes mature themes and subject matter. This may be offensive to some listeners. It is only intended for mature audiences and has been categorized accordingly. While 1C does not present this material in salacious form, we do include it as the relevant and important story element that it is. I invite you to learn more about this show and other 1C content at just1c.com. That's JUSTONEC.com. And now it is my honor and joy to bring you Making the Cut.
A close friend, Tarek, had a World War II German helmet and a pristine German bayonet, which he found preserved in the dry sands of El Alamein. In exchange for my 1/22nd scale model of the Avro Lancaster bomber, he lent me the helmet and bayonet. I had a plan to take the early bus home to meet and impress Daddy.
Daddy was due home today. My plan was to ring our front doorbell. He would answer and immediately forget his angry letter, pull me into a warm embrace. As I planned this out on the morning of March 10th, the hospital in Beirut discharged Daddy. His pleurisy had completely cleared. He got out of bed to gather his belongings, anxious to catch his flight. That afternoon, I eagerly rang the bell to our flat, having donned the helmet and drawn the bayonet, which glimmered in the landing sunlight. I stood there like Caesar, poised with the dagger removed from its sheath, held in mid-air, about to strike. A Roman pose of strength in modern German regalia. Tante Mustaima stood in the open doorway, dressed from head to foot in black. She drew me close to her ample bosom.
Your father died.
Daddy had risen from 10 days of bed rest and collapsed, dying instantly. Tante Mustaima pulled me into the flat. A simple pine coffin lay lengthwise across the floor of Daddy's book-filled study, facing Mecca. I did not cry, although I knew it was expected of me. Tante Suad supervised our servant making drinks for the guests, who sat about paying their respects. She too was dressed in black, holding a soggy tissue to her ashen face. Auntie Jo, who spoke a lot more Arabic than Mother did, answered the constantly ringing telephone and doorbell, greeting and inviting in the guests who came to offer condolences. A United Nations staffer handed Mother 2 envelopes. One contained 100 English pounds, equivalent to about $600, found in Daddy's suit jacket. The other was a signed, lifelong contract with the United Nations, assuring the widow a nominal UN pension. Mother took the items and walked dazedly through the mourners, passing me without saying a word. I was bewildered, unable to comprehend the finality of the situation. Daddy's letter kept floating in front of my eyes. He would never know that in my last exam, I had scored a passing grade. My effort had paid off. I had doubled my score in a matter of weeks. Now there is no way to tell him.
Please tell those women and the sheikh to stop.
Did she not know that their presence was not for her benefit, but for those who came calling? Their faces reflected disbelief. I knew many of them by sight, and greeted others, not knowing their names. They embraced and kissed me in keeping with tradition, saying words of comfort, telling me to be strong, and reminding me that I must now be a man to protect Mother and Gulnar according to our culture. Mother kept shoving Daddy's coffin with her feet so that she could access the balcony. My aunts repeatedly moved the coffin back to its original orientation, with its long axis facing southeast in the direction of Mecca, without saying a word. They wanted their brother's soul to rise toward the holy city. That evening, Mother opened the door to the chauffeur from the Indian embassy. He carried platters of food, fish, chicken, salad, cooked vegetables, rice, and several desserts. The aromas immediately permeated the flat, making my mouth water.
No, thank you. We don't eat this type of food.
I was starving. Neither Gulnar, nor my relatives, nor Auntie Jo had eaten. Mortified, I hailed the driver from the balcony to return. He did not hear me. Did Mother not, after all our years in Egypt, know local customs? Later, after everyone left, Mother moved the coffin again.
Marwan, do you want to come and see your father again?
No. I never want to see him again. The pain is too great. He falsely accused me of being lazy. I resolved to pursue my life without a father. The following morning, several of my uncles arrived on foot. The Indian Embassy's Cadillac, with my close friend Asad, the son of the Indian ambassador, inside, took us to Tahrir Square. In the shade of the menacingly monolithic government building, the Mogama, a large funeral tent had been erected to one side of the grass. We removed our shoes and entered. I joined my grandfather, Gidi, sitting on a cushion next to him while he silently wept. Pillows lined the periphery of the tent, ready to receive the male family members and colleagues attending the funeral. A shrouded body lay in the center of the carpeted floor. It looked remarkably small. Daddy's numerous contemporaries, writers, and friends paid their condolences to a red-eyed Gidi and to me, and then joined us sitting cross-legged around the perimeter, a community gathering to pay their respects to my father. Gidi, slightly sweating, grasped my arm. I could feel his fine tremor. He muttered something to me, which was drowned out by the recitation of Salat al-Ghanazar, a funeral prayer that offers a collective message of forgiveness for the dead, followed by the recitation of Quranic verses amplified by a loudspeaker into Tahrir Square. Dried saliva stands webbed Gidi's cracked lips. He had not had breakfast, perhaps not even his morning tea. His weeping eyes staring into mine revealed the agony of his incomprehensible loss. I was yet to cry. Would I ever? Staring at the lifeless form under the shroud, I tried to get in touch, to connect to Daddy, somehow to let him know that I was a good boy, that I knew he loved me. And I would miss him. A constant stream of mourners interrupted my meditations. By mid-morning, a crowd of over 300 had gathered. Uncles and close colleagues bearing Daddy's body on a wooden pallet, covered with a red mottled shroud, formed the head of a funeral procession. Asad and I lined up behind the body and began to walk. More uncles and Gidi in the Galabeya made up the second row. We were all joined by the Minister of Education, university professors, and deans, including the head of Al-Azhar University, and a number of Daddy's literary colleagues, such as Taha Hussein, Tafiq al-Hakim, and Naguib Mahfouz. Our bank manager, from the head office of the Egyptian National Bank, the head of the United Nations office in Cairo, It seemed everyone of note had come out to bid my daddy farewell. Behind them, my numerous relatives mingled with Daddy's students and the young literary collaborators he had mentored. Men carrying floral bouquets, sprays, and wreaths rounded off the lengthy train of male mourners. Written on the banners of the bouquets were the names of various university departments, faculties, teacher training colleges, and groups throughout the Arab world. Places his books were in use, where he had taught and influenced a progressive national Arabic curriculum. Word of his death had traveled quickly. The procession wound its way across Tahrir Square, interrupting the traffic pattern, and up Suleiman Basha Street, in the direction of the Grappi restaurant. The funeral cortege edged its way through the street against the oncoming automobiles, parting the midday rush like a slow ship, plowing through the oncoming waves. Cars swerved to one side and stopped, reverently allowing the procession to pass. Was this symbolic of Daddy's life? Fighting uphill, against the odds, from an adobe hut to the pinnacle of his career?
If you had no father, you'd not only make an effort, you'd have to struggle, like I had to as I grew up. And your life would be different.
Overwhelmed by anger, I was convinced he had died on purpose, just to teach me a lesson. He wished to believe the worst of me, based on one exam score, as Mother had tattletaled. Still in the state of disbelief, and draped in black, she, Auntie Jo, and most of my aunts watched the procession through Grappi Cafe's windows as we inched our way up Suleiman Basha Street. Once in Suleiman Basha Square, the mourners dispersed as groups of 2 and 3 went on their way. A few days after the funeral, Mother took me into the bedroom, made me try on my father's suits. I had never worn a suit. I did not want to wear a suit.
Try them on, Marwan. Go on.
The sleeves dangled beyond my hands, and I almost tripped over the long pant legs while she held up their waists to prevent them from slithering down to my ankles.
They are made of such fine wool. It is a shame to waste them. Whenever we had extra money, I always wanted him to have a fine new suit. We can't waste them. Daddy's tailor will shorten the sleeves and legs and pull the waist in.
But I'll never wear suits, Mother. I like my shorts. I can't move in these things.
We'll take them to the tailor. He'll fix them for free because your father brought him from the village and helped him start his business. See, he'll raise the shoulders like this.
No, no, no! I wrenched off the clothes. Leave me alone! I want to go and play. I want to go to school and be with my friends. Can't you understand that? I had what Mother called floating anxiety. Without constant accountability to my father, I was on the edge with nothing to anchor me to reality. Late afternoons, Mother often went to see Mrs. Rosemary Johnson in the 7th floor penthouse. While the women visited, I put my troubles aside and eagerly played outside with the twins. On the Saturday closest to my birthday, Mrs. Johnson arranged an afternoon American-style barbecue. Almost 12, I rode the elevator to their penthouse to find Mother in earnest discussion with Mrs. Johnson. They quickly stopped speaking when they saw me. I joined the boys at a separate children's picnic table. The sofragi, butler, cooked hot dogs on a grill and served them to us on sweet rolls, garnished with ketchup, mustard, and relish. The flavors were new and very different from the savor of Egyptian cooking. Mother sat near the penthouse railing. She looked down at me, sitting at my lower perch on the children's picnic table.
You know that the Johnsons are returning to the States in about a month. They want to adopt you. You would grow up in California with Jamie and Jeffrey. You will love living there.
A searing pang lanced across my stomach. I nearly vomited the new, rich food right back onto the table. She was going to abandon me? Dump me with strangers again, far from my Egyptian roots? I was stunned, speechless. I was fatherless, not an orphan. I got up, burning with hatred for this woman who did not value me, her son. Approaching her, God help me, I wanted to shove her backwards over the 7th floor railing. Instead, I walked to the exit and ran down the stairs. A year passed. Military rhetoric in the press and on the radio was rising on this 1-year anniversary of the last Israeli-Egyptian war. I became aware of the approaching age of conscription, 16. I would have to devise a plan to get a passport with an exit visa, as would Gulnar. Neither of us trusted Mother to accomplish it. Another year passed. Still smarting from the loss of Daddy, I developed a routine of rising with the Fajr prayers at 4 each morning. In the quiet hours of dawn, my recitations engendered a sense of determination. I tried to communicate with Daddy, promising him I would do my very best at school. I wanted him to be proud of me. Another year passed, and another. Policies about leaving Egypt became progressively more restrictive. Departing citizens could not legally take more than the equivalent of $12 out of the country. Neither Gulnar nor I had passports. Our joint one had expired long ago, and with Daddy's death, we forfeited our UN travel documents. Mother carried an Egyptian passport, but, as a woman, in theory, she would need a male's written permission to leave the country. In her case, it would require my permission as I was now head of our household. Our daily family existence stayed bizarre. We lived separate lives. Mother was gone all day, presumably teaching, while Gunnar was involved with German school activities. I hovered between the dual orbits of my Egyptian family, with the prevailing Muslim mores in one world, and British school, European culture in the other. Mother recognized Christmas, but she did not observe Muslim holidays. She did not anticipate the dates that changed each year due to the Islamic lunar calendar, nor did she understand their societal significance, their meaning of gratitude, or their importance to me. I wanted to live as an Egyptian, and yet, without constant contact with my Egyptian family members, I lived in a German bubble. Mother also did not celebrate our birthdays. No cards, no cake, no presents. Since the national holiday Shem el Nassim, rites of spring, fell like Easter around my birthday, I was at least conscious of being a year older. Mother, I'm 16 today.
I know. I was there.
I missed Omar's cakes and celebrations. How had my mother not inherited those ways from her own mother? No matter. I found solace and kindness in the arms of other girls. Unlike Mother, the young women at my school found in me an interesting character, and I in them. Especially Magdalena. The first time I laid eyes on her, electricity sparked, and a connection instantly formed. I knew her. She knew me. I spent hours thinking of her. Each time the cold strangeness of my home threatened to break me, I closed my eyes and saw Magdalena's face instead. We both wanted more than either of us instinctively knew we could handle. Each time I saw her, I wondered if this time would be the time. Her smile, her hair, a scent. Everything about her drew me in and away from the pain. But I could not completely give myself to Magdalena. I needed to perform, to show Daddy I could, indeed, do well academically. Passing the obligatory Egyptian Tagaheya examination and the equivalent Oxford O-level allowed me to proceed with further education, thus deferring the draft for a few years. Of course, the better educated I or any Egyptian boy became, the more we were highly targeted for military service. I really needed to get out of Egypt. My male school friends felt it too, although fear of the all-pervasive and dreaded Mukhabarat, the State Security Secret Service, kept us from discussing specifics. When the Suez Crisis interrupted our schooling, scattering Magdalena and most of my friends out of the country, Hassan, Assad, and I joined our remaining classmates for a private tutoring arranged by the Thailand embassy. Egyptian teachers taught English, geography, and maths during the morning. Discovering free afternoons, Hassan and I cycled out to the edge of the Western Delta, where green alfalfa fields met yellow desert sand on the fringes of Mbaba, one of Cairo's poorest suburbs, to visit an air cadet field. It was a huge expanse of compressed black alluvial dirt, dotted with tufts of grass. At its southern end stood a white military barracks with a small control tower. Several single-engine Gumhareya trainers and a couple of tiger moths sat on the tarmac out front. Air cadets of 16 and 17 years of age learned first how to glide and then graduated into flying monoplane trainers. After their maiden flight, they got their pilot license, the entrance to the Egyptian Air Force, and a secure career. The afternoon sun beat down on us as we lay our bicycles on the side of the field. Heat radiated off the compacted mud, shimmering as it rose. We gravitated toward a group of people gathered around a long-winged yellow glider resting on the grass. After greeting us, Sergeant Mohammed surprised me by asking if we wanted a joyride. With no other joy in my life, no Magdalena, no plan for getting out of this country myself, I couldn't answer fast enough. I do! The glider lay on its left wingtip. Its massive wingspan of 54 feet was affixed to its flimsy wooden body above and behind the open cockpit. I climbed into the right-hand side and sat on the plank of a seat, resting my feet on the two pedals before me. A joystick was between my knees. A young English instructor cheerfully got into the pilot's side on my left and harnessed me in, shoulders and lap straps, cautioning me not to move the joystick or use the rudder pedals. Before we started, he familiarized me with the instruments, as he told me he'd share the most important lessons for staying alive once we were airborne. My heart pounded. Was this joyride dangerous? Sergeant Mohammed hooked the glider up to a tow cable, lying in the dirt in front of its nose. The cable connected to a gigantic winch, shimmering like a mirage at the furthest point of the field's western edge, more than 1,000 feet ahead of us. The pilot gave the thumbs up. The assembled group raised the glider's wing to the horizontal position to stabilize the bird. Another thumbs up. Sergeant Mohammed waved, and I felt the jerking tug as the winch took up the cable's slack. When it became taut, we rolled forward into the oncoming dry desert wind. The others ran with us, supporting the glider's wings until the speed became sufficient to lift us off the dirt. My apprehension vanished. Gaining height, we climbed smoothly, sharply, and swiftly, pulled almost vertically by the cable, rising like a kite, climbing through progressively cooler air. The white yaw string in front of us, which had hung limply, became straight in the slipstream, taking on the quality of metal. I was no longer earthbound, but suspended aloft. The desert's fresh air rushed into my face and past my ears, pressing me into my seat. We climbed sunward as the green delta dropped below my right wing, and we sped toward the majestic pyramids on the horizon. The glider had rapidly gained 900+ feet, seemed to level out, reaching the crest of a hyperbolic curve. The instructor pointed to the yellow cable release knob and mimicked a pulling motion. I pulled. The cable fell away, unshackling us, freeing me from my dreary, aimless realities. The oncoming wind kicked us higher into the blue sky, for a moment leaving my belly behind. He thrust the joystick forward. The nose pointed down below the horizon. Flickering desert replaced the blue sky as we gained speed and amazingly climbed further, the earth below speeding under us. The rising currents of cooler and more breathable air coming off the desert buffeted the glider as it lifted us aloft, up, until we were riding the thermals with the birds at about 2,000 feet. For the first time in my life, I left behind my anguish and worries, all earthly oppressions. An invisible draft of dry air carried us higher and straight toward the pyramids, to a height where the sun felt more intense. I was riding the wind. The instructor looked over. He must have recognized my state of total ecstasy. He lightly banked to the left, swung a gentle downward swoop through a section of cloudless blue sky, around the airfield below with its miniature planes and ant-like humans. I saw Gumhareya taking off. That could, no, will, be me one day. Gusts lifted the sailplane in harmony with the wind yet higher, to 3,500 feet. Driven first by the desert thermals, and then by the heat of the alfalfa fields speeding under my wings, we banked over the delta, with Cairo a flickering haze in the distance, reaching a tranquil altitude of 4,000 feet. We glided with the current, like a boat, sweeping along a fast-moving river. I could have stayed aloft forever. As we descended, the crowd on the field grew steadily larger, and as we approached, they scattered from our flight path and likely landing site. Our approach was too high. We would overshoot the field. He motioned for me to yank the lever to my left. Dive brakes popped up from both wings. The glider forcefully shuddered. The vibrations seemed so abrupt and dangerous. Would the wooden plane disintegrate? We dropped like a stone as our airspeed and height precipitously decreased. When he indicated 1, then 2, and finally 3 fingers as my signal, I released the brakes, and abruptly smooth airflow replaced the turbulence over the massive wings. We came in gently, first hopping over a railway embankment, then a convoy of lorries belching black smoke, and then the airfield's perimeter road, touching down close to where we had taken off. We rolled a few feet before the long wing tipped into the ground, halting us, and a group of youths ran up to help retrieve the glider. Hassan beamed. Though it was probably only a 10-minute ride, it felt like forever. I was hooked.
I'm absolutely not signing that. No.
I gazed down at the permission slip lying between us on the table. I needed her permission to take gliding lessons. But...
No, I have lost a husband. I do not want to lose a son as well.
I decided to learn anyway. Whenever Sergeant Mohammed asked me for the signed form, I said I had forgotten it. Eventually, he gave me an Egyptian glider pilot's logbook, into which I carefully recorded each flight and its duration. Finally, either he forgot to ask about the permission slip or he gave up. As a pupil, I had the potential for a pilot's permit, from there to training on the Gumhareya, a pilot license, to avoid immediate drafting into the army, gaining higher education in the Air Force and buying time for the threat of war to dissipate. I formally joined the Egyptian Gliding Club and, for the next few months, we hung out together and competed against one another, avoiding any discussion as to our motives to learn to glide. I took progressively more control of the joystick, gliding from one thermal to another, following the circling birds, staying in the air for longer and longer periods. I finally reached the amount of flying time where the instructors felt I was safe enough to be in command of the glider. From now on, I could choose to glide and be the pilot, one step closer to my Egypt exit strategy. A few weeks later, a middle-aged German engineer from the southern side of the field befriended me when he discovered I spoke his language. He offered to take me up in a trainer. I thought he only meant the tiger moth. Instead, he pointed to his red monoplane, shimmering in the sun. How could I resist? We sat side by side in the enclosed cockpit. Following an all-clear from the control tower, we bounced over the dirt, taking off parallel to the glider on my right in the distance. We gained height rapidly, flying higher than I had ever been in my glider. He throttled back as we cruised, still rising. We steadily approached the Sphinx and pyramids, the altitude giving me my first aerial view of them, sitting on the Giza Plateau. So grand. Flying on, I got a critical view of the desert to the northwest. The desert floor dropped considerably beyond the Giza Plateau, continuing flat and empty to the horizon. No buildings, no trees. I pointed in the direction of our flight. "Siwa! Oasis!" He nodded over the roar of the engine, making a sweeping right-hand bank to give me a better view. He flew a few minutes in level flight. Yes, the desert was flat, leading towards Siwa Oasis, which was more than 3/4 of the way to the Libyan border and my exit. In that momentary view, I saw the beckoning promise of what lay over the horizon, the American air base. For a brief moment, I wondered if my new German friend would take me out of Egypt with him. What was he doing in Cairo? Was he really on his way to Cape Town? Would it remain a secret if I discussed it with him? He glanced at me. Was he reading my thoughts? As he banked to the right, heading toward the airfield, silence descended in the cockpit despite the engine. My mind raced. I had 2 stripes, Egyptian and European. Which was the more dominant? Did I have to choose again? The price of flying out would be to forfeit my father's cultural heritage. Was I willing to leave my home? I decided not to risk it. The Egyptian radars faced north, tracking British flights from Cyprus, and east, fearing an Israeli strike. My plan was to learn to fly the Gumhareya and, on my maiden solo flight, head west past the pyramids. I would then drop low, throttle back, and fly just above the desert floor, gaining enough lift from the rising heat, saving precious fuel, while crossing the vast empty desert toward the Siwa. Past the oasis, I would correct to a northwesterly direction, crossing the border into Libya and to freedom. 1 full tank, I calculated, might barely make it. I hoped that I would be picked up, an intruder worth checking out, by the Wheeler's U.S. Air Force Base radar. I might not make it out alive, but for the sake of an education, I was willing to take the risk. As I advanced my learning skills, school required that I enter the Officer Training Corps. Sergeant Sharkey emphasized the spit and polish of our ill-fitting uniforms, lecturing us to shine our buttons and belt buckles and keep the spats white. He taught us to crawl, single file, dig zigzag trenches, then camouflage them. We drilled endlessly and competed with other OTCs at a shooting range. I was issued an old British Lee Enfield bolt-action magazine-fed rifle. In the confusion, not knowing which was my target, I managed to fire 1 shot that rang loudly in my right ear, giving me instant vertigo and tinnitus with deafness. I could never be a warrior. Still, the conscription letter arrived. Uncle Farid drove me to the recruitment center near the English school and waited outside. Hundreds of young men stood in their fishermen's harem underpants in a line that snaked from one room to another. I was the conspicuous odd man out. European features, pale skin, glasses, white marks, and Spencer jockeys. Eventually, I left the center with a certificate of final military exemption status. I failed because I wore glasses. I now had the most crucial document needed for getting a passport. Coming out of the recruitment office, breathing a sigh of relief, I waved the exemption certificate. We headed for one of downtown Cairo's restaurants. As summer came to an end, though, Mother surprised me.
I've arranged for you to finish your schooling in Manchester.
Does that mean I can officially get a passport to leave Egypt? And what do we do to get one? When do we go?
I didn't tell you, but I've arranged for all that. You must see a Mr. Ali at the Mukhabarat, and he will sign some official documents that will facilitate getting a passport.
We left for England 2 weeks later, crossing the Mediterranean on the Esperia, and drove up to Hamburg.
I abruptly left Egypt after a farewell lunch with my family. They expected me to be successfully educated like my father and to return home to the family fold. No one anticipated the turns my life would take.
You've been listening to Making the Cut from 1C Productions. Making the Cut was written, produced, and directed by Rebeca Seitz, based on Michael Meguid's manuscript, Mastering the Knife. Noah James played Michael Meguid. Other roles were brought to life by the voice talent of Nuha Almadani, Michelle Tischer, and James Smiley. Audio engineering provided by Zisher LLC. Learn more at makingthecutpodcast.com.